following podcasts reflect the views and research of the speaker and do not necessarily represent those of Sydney Harbour Foreshore Authority.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for coming today and listening. I started with Sea Shepherd 2.5 years ago when I quit my job in property in the city, and I went to the head office near America and Canada and volunteered on this island, which is where their head office is, and had no intention on going on the boats. It looked all a bit scary to me. And then Paul Watson, the captain, said, would you like to go to Antarctica? So it was something that I couldn't refuse, and it was an amazing 2.5 years. So a lot of people think that the logo's a bit ominous and a bit scary, and they say, why don't you have some beautiful animal there? I think it, puts people off. But what it really does represent is we're the good pirates of the sea. So it comes from being a shepherd who looks after the sheep, and we are looking after the wildlife in the oceans. So I like to start with this because a lot of people forget the basics, that we're on this beautiful planet and this is our only home, and we're doing an amazingly great job of destroying it rapidly. And it shouldn't really be called Earth, it should be called ocean, because over 70% of the planet is ocean. And it's the lungs of the earth and a very important part of our survival. Whaling is very, very important, but really overfishing is what is destroying the oceans. I think in 30 years' time, most world fisheries would have collapsed. We're consuming seafood at an incredible rate, and it's not so much what we're actually catching and eating, it's actually what we're catching and throwing back dead, because it's not the targeted fish that those fishing boats are wanting to get. And there's very destructive practices such as bottom trawling, which is basically like ploughing in the ocean floor, similar to deforestation. A lot of these things are still happening in Australia too, but not many people know about it. So there needs to be a big education process in the next couple of years. So I thought to myself, if we can't even save the whale, how are we going to save all the rest of the other creatures in the ocean? So that's why I joined Sea Shepherd. So conservation laws are in place, but they're not being enforced. So Sea Shepherds really is on the front line, being the police of people who are legally poaching animals from the ocean. And we do it very simply, and we actually speak the language of the poachers, and that is profit and loss. They're not listening to the conservation laws of the Antarctic Treaty and CITES and the law of the sea and all the other laws. So we go after them, and we go after their profit, because we want them to eventually leave the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary, because they can't keep losing money year after year because they're not listening to anything else. So a lot of people know Sea Shepherd because we protect the whales, and I'll talk about trips in Antarctica in a minute. But we also do other things in the ocean, and the overfishing, for example, shark finning. 70 to 100 million sharks are killed every year. And look, a lot of people think, oh gosh, sharks, I don't like sharks, they're terrible things, a bit scary when you go surfing. And I thought that honestly about 3 years ago too, but they're very, very vital for the health of the ocean, because they are at the top of the ecosystem chain. And they also go after sick and fish that don't have, aren't surviving very well, and they eat those ones, hence the species with the better gene pool can keep on breeding. So they really do, take away the sick ones, and that's all for a healthy ocean. And that's for the shark fin soup. Hopefully no one's had that here. Bluefin tuna. There's only 3% left of Atlantic bluefin tuna in the world. And we go up to the Mediterranean every summer, and we stop the illegal killing of bluefin tuna. This is a big problem because although it's ruled by some governing bodies like ICAT, they're meant to take about 13,000 tonnes, but 65,000 tonnes are taken every year, and it's not being controlled and regulated properly. And, there is that argument, though, but, you can farm them. But the big problem with that is farming tuna and a lot of aquaculture, they're actually taking wild juveniles from the wild, putting them in these pens for 2 years, feeding them fish meal, so other fish from other parts of the ocean, but they're still taking out the wild gene pool. So 3% left, it's pretty bad. Paul Watson, the founder of Sea Shepherd, he started out by wanting to stop the seals being clubbed in Canada, And that is naturally ending because Russia last year joined the EU and said we will not import any more seal products from Canada, which is absolutely fantastic. The EU has been fantastic in leading the way in that. But there's also a lot of seal clubbing in Namibia. And in fact, the person who actually runs that company is an Australian who lives in Sydney. I'll tell you his address later. And that's obviously the seal pelts. It's pretty brutal. My last campaign was up in the Faroe Islands near Denmark, where they go after 1,000 pilot whales. So it's not just the Japanese whalers we go after, it's people of all different nationalities. And their argument, I mean, these are the most beautiful islands you've ever been to. If you ever get the chance, it is just incredible up there. And their argument, they say, is, oh, but it's tradition that we kill these whales. And tradition is just not a good enough excuse now in this day and age and what's happening to the planet. And just because something is tradition, it does not mean that it's right. And how they do it is they herd these pilot whales into a cove, if you've ever seen any pictures, and it's an extremely very painful way. All the babies, everything, it's a terrible ritual. And it's not tradition anymore because they used to do this when this was their only source of food. They used to do this when they didn't have big boats come and deliver food, aeroplanes coming in. They didn't do it when they had mobile phones. The only way they communicated the hunt to the other islands was burning fire, having fires. And these days it's all technical. They've got very fast boats. Tradition is just not a good enough excuse. So the great thing, while we're up there, they didn't kill any whales for 2 months because now the camera is the most powerful weapon in terms of environmental atrocities. Sea Shepherd or anyone can take a photo of something really bad that's happening with the environment, and with Facebook and Twitter and everything, everyone knows about it instantly. So they didn't kill any, but the week after we left, they killed about 80 of them. So at least we know our presence is doing good there. So they're a funny looking whale, actually. They've got round heads, very social. They live for 60 years, incredibly intelligent, beautiful animals, and a few of the sea shepherds were lucky enough to swim with them, and they were very gentle and didn't hurt them. So Paul Watson, you might have seen him, he's the founder of Sea Shepherd. He was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, but then broke away and set up Sea Shepherd in 1977 because he was frustrated that there wasn't enough frontline direct action being done. So the people that come on the Sea Shepherd boats are from a wide range of different places. We have Japanese on the boat, which are wonderful. We have people from Africa, America, England, Australia, all from different backgrounds. You get sort of lawyers from New York to people, hippies born up in Byron. So it's a big mix of people. All volunteers except the odd ones, such as the engineers, because I was saying to Chris, you don't want sort of people coming in and fiddling with the engine for 6 weeks and then going again, So we do have the odd person paid, but it's not like the other environmental organisations. We don't have big office rents, we don't have big salaries, it's pretty much all volunteers. So when I got invited to go to Antarctica, Paul Watson said, right, I want you to go to Mauritius, don't tell anyone where you're going, don't even tell your parents. And I said, okay. They said, we've got a secret boat that the world doesn't know about, and we're going to go down to Antarctica and we're going to surprise the whaling fleet. But if you tell anyone, it's going to destroy this, $3 million strategy. So my mother got a bit concerned when I said I need to be dropped off the international airport. And I just said, look, just don't ask me questions, I'm fine. And so I got there and we worked for 6 weeks. It was just a complete rust bucket, this boat, which is now looking fabulous. But it was a lot of hard work trying to get this, trying to get the engine actually working, parts from Europe and then when we went out to sea, we painted it black because a lot of people came past the boat and said, what are you guys? And, we had to make up all these stories. And so we headed for Antarctica, which is a massive, massive place. It's 1.4 times the size of America. And it's actually not owned by anyone. And there's an Antarctic Treaty of 1959, which is where 48 nations have signed an agreement saying, look, we think we own part of it, but we won't do anything but peace and research, which is why people are so sort of annoyed with the Japanese whalers, because this is meant to be a place for just peace and research, and they're going against it because they're doing economic activity we're killing the whales for profit. So going down there is very treacherous. It's one of the most dangerous seas in the world. A lot of people didn't emerge from their cabins for about 3 weeks, lost a lot of weight. A few people getting seasick. Very icy, obviously, huge waves. But it is beautiful down there. So in the event that we have to actually jump off, which hopefully you don't have to, but you know, some of these old engines, they can catch on fire, or you can breach the hull, which is you put a big hole in the ships. I mean, they are ice class, but they're not ice breakers, so they've still just got steel that's only a few millimetres, so they can easily break a hole in them if you ram into it's called a bergy bit or a growler, which is a smaller name for a big iceberg. Very clumsy, so we had to practice going in them. Now, when we go down there, it's very, very simple. I know it looks like we are pretty violent and aggressive, but we're really not most of the time. We do have tactics where we need to stop them whaling without hurting them or the whales or ourselves. But our most simple strategy is actually finding this one ship. And this is the last whaling factory ship in the world. It's actually a factory which has about 100 or 150 factory workers in there, ready to receive the whale up the slipway, chop it up, vacuum pack it, box it and freeze it, ready for sale when they get to Tsukuji Fish Market, which is the biggest fish market in the world in Tokyo. In fact, most of our tuna from Australia goes through Tsukuji and then probably comes back again. So once we find this, it completely shuts down whaling, because the killer ships, also known as the harpoon ships, they don't even bother whaling, because they know they would never be able to load a fresh whale onto this ship, because we simply would get in their way and wouldn't allow them. So the great news of actually this morning is the whaling fleet are actually going home today. So it's a good day to do a presentation. So they're heading home, because about 5 days ago our ships found this ship, which is very late in the season actually. Normally in the last couple of years I've been on the boats, we found them so Christmas, and but they've done a good job of getting away from us. Anyway, they call it research, which has got to be the biggest environmental joke. It's embarrassing for the Japanese whalers that they even have that written on their ships. You don't need to kill a whale to get all the research that you need. The only time you would need to kill a whale for research is to get the information in the inner ear, which is you have to kill a whale to do that. Now, they don't need that to work out what fish they're eating. And you can do a biopsy, which is a chunk of skin comes out, still pretty painful, and you can then measure the dioxins and the mercury and all the things you need to research. So you can see that's where the whales go up the slipway. Now, this was taken by the Australian government about 5 years ago, and this shows what they do in order to get their whales. They often go after the baby, because they're mammals, warm-blooded like us, the minke, and then they know that the mother is going to hang around and they want the bigger one. So it's pretty nasty. So that's the humpback. So finding that ship is very, very tricky. So we use radars, helicopter that can go quite a long way, spot the factory ship, and then our bigger ships or the smaller, faster boats can get there within a couple of days. You guys might have seen this one. This is Gojira, now renamed the Bridget Bardot. That's a really fast boat that can also go and scout around for the factory ship. So we had a similar one like that got hit. That's actually what the boats look like today. They got repainted last year. And we also have these speedboats as well, which we actually use these boats mainly to try and stop the harpoon boats, and we put lines in front of them hoping they're going to get tangled up in a propeller. A way that we can stop them without hurting them, which works pretty well. We throw butyric acid, which is a rotten butter. It's a biodegradable thing that's found in a lot of foods. And we do this mainly because we throw it onto the deck of the whaling ship, because when they do eventually get a whale up there, if they do, the meat smells so bad that they won't be able to sell it. So again, we're talking the language of the whalers, and that's eating into their profit and loss. So gets a bit heated down there, but once we find the factory ship, we stay with it, and last year it was fantastic. We followed it all the way to South America, and eventually they said to the world, we've actually got to go back to Japan. It was a big celebration because we thought maybe this is the last year that they're going to go down there. But unfortunately, they have returned again this year and probably will next year as well. Another way of shutting them down is we go and find their refueling ship, because if we can find that, they won't be able to refuel their harpoon boats. The factory ship has a different fuel of their own, and they've got such a huge boat they can have a 3 or 4 months capacity. But the harpoon boats are very fast. They go about 25 knots, and they use up a lot of fuel if they're going at a fast pace. So if we can find that, that's a great way of shutting down whaling too. We've used another tactic, which is transponders. So we go up in the night, and night means still light because you're down in summer in Antarctica, it's light the whole time. But there's about 3 hours where it's a little bit darker, and we go and sneak up to them and put that on. So if we lose them, we know where they are in the ocean. It's a funny game actually. It's like a slow-moving board game. You know, we think, oh, the whalers could be over there. It takes us 3 weeks to get there, and then if we're wrong, we've got to work out the next chess move. But it can be a long time at sea with not a lot happening. Although you might have seen the show that is on called Whale Wars. It looks like, you know, we're about to die every second, but no, there's a lot of downtime. There's quite a lot of ramming. They ram us, and we had quite a big hole in our boat, which luckily was above the waterline. But if it wasn't, we would have been in serious trouble. And there's certain areas of Antarctica where we're 3 weeks away from help. It does get very violent down there. There's quite a few times I thought that was the end. I was going to die, but you get through it, and you know, you realise you're there for a pretty important thing, so it's worth the risk. The first year I went, the Artie Gill got crashed into. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was front page of the papers pretty much all the way around the world. There's a lot of cat and mouse down there and sort of scaring each other, and so these 2 boats were doing a bit of that, but we didn't think that the Shona Maru would actually turn and cut into the Artie Gill. The captain of our boat shouldn't have been as close to the harpoon boat, but it was still far enough to think that they actually wouldn't want to kill them. And it came to the point where you could see that the whalers were getting so frustrated because every whale they catch is worth about $250,000, and they can see that if they can't make money, they're not going to obviously go home with any money either. So it does get pretty aggressive. There were 6 guys on that boat, and none of them were killed, but it was very, very close call, especially because it's only made of carbon fibre. And normally you have 1 or 2 of the guys sleeping down into the pointy part of the boat because it's a 24-hour driving boat. So you've always got different shifts and different guys sleeping. So that's it when it got crashed into. That's when he looks a bit shaken up. The first year after we came down from Mauritius, we ran out of water. That was interesting. The water maker didn't work. So the more water you drink, the more you had to drink because it was so salty. So we actually had to go in and grab some growlers, which was interesting. I've got to say, it's not luxury conditions on the boat. You got about 6 girls in one room. Doesn't bother you at the time though. Vegan. I really didn't really understand what vegan was when I came onto the boat, to the horror of many of the crew people. And that actually means like nothing to do with an animal at all. So you don't eat honey, or obviously no dairy, absolutely nothing. But it is amazing how the food can be so incredible. These are professional vegan cooks. Laura, she's been down for 7 years down to Antarctica. And things can be replaced, like honey can be replaced with agave, I think it's called. And it was a different way of thinking, because I've been brought up with a lot of meat and vegetables and fish and everything. So it was an eye-opener. Sushi. And, what I realised is the main taste is actually the wasabi and the soy sauce. I didn't actually really taste the difference. There was no tuna in there. And obviously it's beautiful down there. Got the emperor penguin. It's a long time down there. We're on the boat for 3 months on the Bob Barker. We don't even see land. So, you've got to be willing to want to get on with people. And that's Animal Planet, who film it down there, which we thought was a little bit annoying at first, because you're on a boat. It's a bit like Big Brother. You don't want a camera in your face the whole entire time. You're tired, you're exhausted, you just, oh my gosh. But after a while, they become part of the furniture and become your friends as well. And then you realise how this issue has become so well known around the world because of this show called Whale Wars, which is the biggest show in America on Discovery and Animal Planet. So it's really, really got a lot of traction about, you know, what's happening down there. Where, I mean, I sometimes speak to the odd Australian and they don't know that whaling's happening in our backyard, but most people do now. In the last 3 years, it's become a big issue. It looks like a painting, but it's actually a picture, but that's a leopard seal. Beautiful. Lots of dolphins on the way down. In Antarctica, it's too cold for a lot of species below the Antarctic convergence, where the species are very separated. Orca. And the albatross. Beautiful, beautiful bird. There'd always be an albatross on our bow. And it's probably my favourite animal. I've never ever seen an albatross before, but you can get up to about 3.5 metre wingspan. Just the most beautiful, most energy efficient bird in the world. And unfortunately, with long lining, over 100,000 of those die every year. So there's a big effort around the world to end long lining.
What's long lining?
Long lining it's a way of fishing, and it's a long line goes out, and every metre there's a hook with a sardine, and it's mainly to catch tuna. But the amount of, so when they pull this up, every metre there's you know often an animal, and it's all the endangered turtles. 6 of them, they get caught, and the birds come down thinking there's a fish. They grab it and then they drown. A lot of different shark species and different fish as well die just to get the main fish, which would be a swordfish or one of the billfish or a tuna. So that's happening a lot in Australia too. So that's a great sight when we see the factory ship heading home. And last year we saved 863 whales, which was great. This year hasn't been so good because it took us a while to find it. But we'll know in April. The Japanese government will release how many whales have actually been caught this year. But it probably saves still about 50%. They go for 1,030 whales when they go down there each summer.
Do they multiply, breed, do they breed quickly?
They don't really breed that quickly, about every 2 years, and then they'll have their babies with them for about 6 months. Like the humpback population is actually increasing by 10% a year because that's a protected species now, especially with Australia. The Japanese whalers do go after some, but with a lot of pressure they have been saying, look, you know, we won't get the humpback. But they also go after the endangered fin whale, which is the second biggest whale in the world. The first one is the blue, and it's the biggest animal to be on the earth ever. Then you've got the endangered fin whale, and that's actually listed under CITES, which is the Convention for International Trade of Endangered Flora and Fauna, which means it tries to stop the trade of animals from country to country. For example, they did that with the elephant ivory, and that was a way that ivory really, a lot of elephants stopped being poached because the trade was just dried up. It still happens a lot illegally, a lot of elephants are still killed. But so the Japanese go after that whale as well, which is another reason why they're breaking the law down there. This is my theory, and it's not a sea shepherd theory, but I actually think that the Japanese whalers are not down there really for the whales, because why would they want to lose $40 million every year, year after year? But Antarctica is a very special place because it's the last wilderness that's unclaimed. It has a bigger supply of fresh water. They think that if Antarctica melted, everywhere around the world the sea will rise by 65 metres. That's not going to happen for a long time, but that just shows how huge it is. It's thick with ice up to 4 kilometres deep. But more importantly, it has, in terms of an economic point of view, it has gold, copper, all these metals, and possibly the second biggest coal field in the world. They've found it in 2 different places. One's a high strand and the other's not so much. So I think Japan is keeping their economic finger in that area, because if they prove to have 14 years or more of continual economic activity, in 2048, when the Antarctic Treaty ends, all the countries are going to come and say, I own it, I own it, I own it. Now, that's one of the reasons why it's not a World Heritage Site, because no one actually has claimed stake to it yet. And Australia actually claims 40% of Antarctica. but that's going to cause a world fight, because really this is such a valuable thing. But it's also got such incredible animal species, and it's also the main place in the world which is a library to the whole history of the planet. They take these big metre long, or how long they are, a couple of metre long pieces of ice, and they can take it out and they can see the history of what happened with different levels of carbon and different things like explosions. They can see little lines of ash in there, and it's basically a huge history and library of what happened over the last millions and millions of years of the planet. So it is a special place. It should be a place for peace and research, and it's a place that everyone should visit if you don't mind a bit of downtime. It takes a while to get there. And so Australia, we have a lot to do in terms of saving our own oceans, and I think that we should lead the way when it comes to making Antarctica a World Heritage Site. And I think the way to go about that is to say to the world and the other 48 nations, we'll give up our claim. We won't go for the 40% like the world recognises that we have. Most people recognise Australia does have that much claim, as long as no one else does it. And let's make it actually owned by whoever, maybe just a different entity. And then once we do that, then we can list it as a World Heritage Site. But because it's not owned by anyone at the moment, it's not in the rules of becoming a World Heritage Site. But I think that's the way to do it. And that means that no one's going to hack into it and get their grubby little fingers into it like they have with the Arctic and the rest of the world. So, Sea Shepherd, you can follow us on the website and Facebook. If you want to keep in touch with me, you can Facebook me as well. And there's still lots to talk about, so I haven't finished yet. If anyone's got lots of questions and things you want to know about.